Hello everyone, this is your favorite Murted alive once again, and today we are going to talk about the Crusaders who invaded the Muslim world. And for that we have our brother Lloyd. How are you, brother?
Hello there. How are you doing? I'm good, thank you. I'm very good. Glad to be here.
Oh, thank you so very much. It is an honor whenever you come, you give us such beautiful information with all the evidences. And today, I love this topic because, Crusaders were really bad people. You know, they they attacked the Muslimin, poor Muslimin, and they were destroying them and removing Islam and all that. The whole 9 yards. What would you say about that, man?
The Crusaders were very bad because they occupied the Muslims' lands before the Muslims got there.
Exactly. They oh, they occupied the Muslim land before Muslims got there?
Yes, and
Yeah,
then
no, no,
they
no. No, no, no. That's the wrong narrative, brother. Muslims were there, Crusaders attacked them.
okay. Here's an interesting point. In 732, 100 years after Muhammad is supposed to have died, Muslims were roughly 20 kilometers from the city of Paris in France. They were trying to conquer France. Now, what were the Muslims doing in France in the year 732? Did the French attack the Middle East before that? Did the Europeans invade Arabia?
That's a very good question, but we are never supposed to go into logic and history with Islam.
You're not supposed to use logic in history because it's like sunlight to a vampire, which is what logic and history and facts do to Islam.
No, 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 no. You are going very different about it, man. No, 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 no. We are not
So
supposed to do
no, the
that.
Crusaders were very evil people. They
Mhm.
they slaughtered people until the streets were flowing with blood up to people's hips and knees and ankles, and it was horrible.
Yeah, that's more like the right narrative, brother. That is the right narrative. This, like, anything you say otherwise is Islamophobe, man. Islamophobe. Don't be an Islamophobe.
Is Islam's religion of peace.
Exact. Now you got
No,
it, brother.
a
Now
piece of you
you
over
got it.
here, a piece of you over there, a piece of you, you know.
See, now you are going into details. Remember, I told you no
Oh,
logic, no
sorry, sorry.
detail.
I must not do. I forget. I must not do that
See,
again.
yeah, logic and history and right information means you are an Islamophobe. Remember that.
Okay, and we must not be Islamophobes. Okay, so
Yes, we
we
just
must.
simply cannot be. That's the wrong approach. We cannot be an Islamophobe person at all.
Okay, so I won't do that. I will. I'm going to read these hate facts because I'm going to write. I'm going to talk about what horrible people have said. Called historians and researchers using facts, and then I'm just going to say the horrible things that they say.
Okay, that's fine. You can quote somebody, but try to quote it in a way that you would hide the true intentions and your purpose is to spread Islam. Okay?
Um, you mean like when you step on a landmine and it explodes and it spreads you all over the place? You mean that is how I want to spread Islam?
Allahu Akbar.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. I will try and do my best. But if I start getting factual, just let me know. Okay. Right.
Okay,
So
I will definitely do my best to stop you wherever you will quote a source which is not a Muslim source because we have to stick to a Muslim source to know about Islam, right?
um, well, look. For instance, I don't talk about Islam because I'm not a Muslim, and therefore, if you're not a Muslim, you can't talk about Islam. but then also the Muslims should shut up about Christianity and the Bible because they're not Christians.
Oh, you are right. You are right. But all the prophets were Muslim, brother.
Which Quran did they have at the time?
The one that Allah sent Wahi on the
The
previous prophets,
the one that was
including
spread by
Adam.
word of mouth Quran. That one.
Now
Yeah.
you got it. But you know you're not supposed to say that like this.
Sorry, man. Yeah. The problem is that I've been confused by the facts.
See, I told you, you cannot use the facts or the logic or the history. Why are you still
Okay.
using it?
Well, today I want to talk about when Christians attacked Muslims, an event
Perfect.
known as the Crusades. Right. So we're going to speak about when Christians attack, and when they not only attack but they kick butt. So we will be talking about that.
Exactly. Now that's the right approach. Now I am beginning to like you.
Awesome. I'm trying my best here. So yeah. Should I? Hi everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Lloyd de Jong. South African. I live in Poland. I'm originally from Cape Town. I live in Poland, and yeah, I spent 11 years in the Middle East. I traveled throughout most of the Middle Eastern countries. I've been to all of the Gulf countries and many others in North Africa, Asia, and so on, and around the other Arab countries. I have been at least 20 times to Qatar, for instance. I've been a dozen times or more to Oman. I've traveled up and down. I worked in national defense. So my job is to make sure that groups like ISIS, Al Qaeda, Quds Force didn't blow things up and kill people. So I had a lot of time to become very intimately familiar with Islamic culture. So that's it for me. And I'll be talking about
Yeah, Al
uh,
Qaeda and all these are not Muslims. You know that, right?
they're not real Muslims. No.
Exactly, exactly. So we are on the same page, brother. They are not real Muslims, even though they use the Quran and the Sunnah to defend whatever they are doing, and they know the Quran and Sunnah more than any of these Muslims in the West. But they
So how is
are
Islam the fastest growing religion? If whenever you point to an Islamic group, they say that's not real Muslims. You point to the Shia, they're not Muslims. You point to any group, the Wahhabis, they're not proper Muslims. No, those aren't real Muslims. So how are they 1.7 billion Muslims if none of the Muslims you look at are proper Muslims?
once again you are going for logic. What happened to you? Why are you bringing logic again and again?
I was my education. I was educated in Africa, as you know, as a low standard. I was educated at a school for emotionally disturbed teachers, and it has had an effect on me.
Dude, that is exactly why Muhammad called Africans raisin head.
Yeah.
You forgot that part? Like,
No, I did not.
so come on, man. That's why you are bringing logic again and again. That is why uh, Muhammad was white. He was not black. And anybody who will say that Muhammad is black, he should be put to death. How can you forget these simple things in Islam and yet talk about logic? Now, see, that's the wrong approach, man. You are being an Islamophobe, brother.
Maybe I'm just gonna have to just live with that from now on.
Okay,
So
that makes sense.
okay, okay, yeah. So shall we jump into this topic? Do you have any questions before we begin, or any comments before we begin?
No, let's just go directly into the topic. Let's share the screen. Let's see
Yeah.
how Crusaders did such a bad thing in attacking Muslimin.
Okay. Right. So according to Islam, right, and according to Islamic scholars, the Crusades are still going on. You may have heard of, just briefly, I'll show you. You may have heard of the book called The Combat Kit by a man called Ahmad Didat, and he says, according to him and many other scholars, the Crusades are still going on. He says in the current crusade, the Christian world has launched their Scud, which is the Holy Bible in 2,000 different languages. Now, I won't go further, but he talks about this, and this book, just so you know, is called The Combat Kit Against Bible Thumpers, right? The Combat Kit Against Bible Thumpers, and it is Christians like Jehovah's Witnesses, etc., who harass Muslims in their own homes by Ahmad Didat. But enough of Ahmad
So
Dedda. Yep.
Crusaders are still Crusaders are still attacking Muslims.
The Crusades are still going on. Unfortunately, according to them, the Crusades are still going on, even though they ended like 800 years ago and more. So let's start. So today we're going to talk about when Christians attacked Muslims, the Crusades. And here's the thing, the Muslims are still crying about it. Still crying about it.
Because
Okay?
that was a massacre, brother. That was a massacre. You
Yeah,
have
as
no
I
idea.
said, they took the Muslims' land before the Muslims got there, and they're not happy about that. Now, okay, so I'm going to do a brief primer on the Crusades because there's a standard Islamic narrative on the Crusades, and then there are the facts, the hate facts. And today we're going to talk about the hate facts. Okay, so the First Crusade began during the Middle Ages in 1095 as a result of a cry for help against invading Islamic armies. Now, the person who called the crusade, for at least 4 years, he had been asked to help, and this help was not forthcoming until eventually it came. But the First Crusade was as a result of a cry for help against these massive Islamic armies that were invading the Christian territory. The First Crusade happened 460 years after the first Christian city was overrun by Muslim armies. 457 years after Jerusalem was conquered by Muslim armies. 453 years after Egypt was taken from Christendom by Muslim armies. 443 years after Muslim armies invaded and plundered Italy. And when they went into Italy, they were there for 400 years. No women were to be found within 100 kilometers of the coast because these pirates would land and take all the women as slaves and as sex slaves. So for 400 years, Italy was overrun or half overrun by Muslims, and it took 400 years to push them out, right? For the Italians to eventually push them out. The Crusades started 443 years after, okay, Muslim armies plundered Italy, and 427 years after Muslim armies first laid siege to Christendom's eastern capital of Constantinople, right, today known as Istanbul. 380 years after Spain was conquered by Muslim armies. 363 years after France was first invaded by Muslim armies. 249 years after Rome itself was attacked by Muslim armies twice. And this is why the Vatican has that wall. Now remember, this was only after 4 centuries, and thousands of battles, thousands of attacks. Okay, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of these attacks. So there were at least 500 major battles, but there were hundreds and thousands of skirmishes and attacks and pirating attacks. So this was only after 4 centuries of church burnings, killings, enslavement, and the forced conversions of Christians, as well as Jews and others. Okay, so by the time the Crusades began, 2/3 of the Christian world, so at the time the Christian world was called Christendom, the land that had been civilized under Christian civilization was called Christendom. And 2/3 of the Christian world had been conquered and its people forced to convert or be enslaved to Islam.
Brother,
If you
what
look
are
at the
you
map,
doing? What are you
yeah.
doing? There is no forced conversion in Islam.
These are the hate facts. I'm giving the enemy propaganda. These are the hateful things that the enemy is saying.
Oh, okay. Please carry.
So now, without Charles Martel, right, the Battle of Tours in 732, don't forget, here in the Battle of Tours, the Muslims were what, 20 kilometers from Paris? Because you see, 1,000 years in the future, the French would go into North Africa, into Muslims' land. So 1,000 years previously, the Muslims decided to attack Paris as a defensive option. See, because Islam's a religion of peace. There were the Templar Knights from 1129 to 1312. There were Alcides de Reconquista in 1085, who took back Spain, right? There was the Venetian fleet at Lepanto in 1571, and the Polish and the Austrian knights and others at the gates of Vienna in 1683. And there were the Serbian Hajduks fighting off the Ottoman Turks in 1804. If not for the events, and I need to say, for those to rub a few feathers the wrong way on both sides, you need to thank the Catholic Church for this. If it were not for the Catholic Church, you would be bowing down with your bum in the air, praying to Allah right now. So if it weren't for these Catholics, Europe might have been converted to Islam. Understand? So during this perennial jihad, because the jihad can never end until the entire world is totally conquered by Islam, right? This jihad that began in the 7th century, almost 3/4 of Christendom's original territory, which includes all of North Africa, Egypt, Greater Syria, and Anatolia, what we know as Turkey and Asia Minor, right, was permanently swallowed up by Islam. So the only remnant, the only piece of Christendom that is left today in that part of the world is Europe. So when we look at a map later, you'll see that very little is left, like 20 to 25% is left, and the rest has been taken by Islam. And if you want to hold on to that last 25%, you might want to start doing something.
Okay,
Up
okay,
to, over to you.
okay. This is very brutal. This is very brutal and very Islamophobe. But this is text, what you are showing. Thank you. I would like people to see visual. There is one video that I have watched long time ago.
Yeah, I have one in my video. There's one that will appear. Yes, I have it.
Okay,
It's in
we
my
will
presentation.
show that as well. I want to
Yes,
show this one in the meantime, if you don't mind,
sure.
because I'm gonna spend like 5 minutes on this video. This is done by Dr. Bill Warner
No,
in
I have that.
2012. You
I
have
have
that as
this.
well?
I have it. I'm
Okay,
going to be showing it. I will be showing it
okay.
as part of it.
Then should I not show it right now? Because what you read, I'm gonna just play that part
You
where
know, I've got the
he
relevant
shows the
section.
map.
Yeah,
Hmm?
I've got the relevant section, and I will be showing that later. So there's no
Okay,
need right now.
okay. I
Um,
removed it. I removed it, brother. There you
okay,
go. All back.
appreciate it.
Because you read the whole thing. Visualization of the whole thing is wow. This is the wow
Yeah,
factor of this video.
yeah, we'll get to that. But so everyone, the links to the presentation is in the chat. Okay, it has been pinned in the chat. I have dropped this, and you can download the entire presentation. Is available for you to look at. All the links, everything is available for you to see. All right. So now the History Channel. Let's start off with the History Channel and how even major television channels will air propaganda. So the History Channel aired a show called The Secrets of the Quran on the 12th of October, 2008. Or maybe it was 2012, October 8th. Who knows? So this was the show Decoding the Past, The Secrets of the Quran. Okay. And what they did was the show explained the ideology of jihad as a result of the Crusades. So they claimed that the Islamic jihad was because of the Crusades. It denied the fact that jihad is a fundamental ideology, is a fundamental doctrine of Islam.
See,
Right?
that's the right information, man. That is the right information. The jihad happened due to Crusaders.
Yeah,
Now you are telling the truth.
but the Crusades ended 800 years ago. So why hasn't the jihad ended?
Oh, once again, no logical question, brother.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. So now this show, as it explained that the ideal of jihad was a result of the Crusades. And otherwise, they very positively affirm that Muslims are only supposed to use force in self-defense. This, as we know, is a lie. So now, to maintain a superficial consistency, major events in Islamic history were ignored or glossed over. So be careful of the propaganda that you're going to find online. Now, the Umayyads. So I'm just going to switch over so I can see all the comments. Right. So now you've got the Umayyads, right? They were never even mentioned. So this is one of the Islamic dynasties. Were never mentioned during the show. And the original Islamic conquest of Syria, Palestine, Iran, Iraq, and Egypt was all just conveniently sort of, left out. So now, although they were visible on the maps, there was no detail provided, and they were often only characterized as spreading the word of Islam because the lie, right, that they tell is that this happened peacefully. Islam was never spread by the sword. It was all very, very peaceful. Now, this is a distortion of history, okay? This is a grave distortion when the original Islamic conquest, which consisted not only of violent invasions, but was not even intended to spread the word or to obtain converts. They were simply to conquer. Now, Islam was initially viewed as a religion just for Arabs, and it does say so. However, it changed. So the earliest non-Arab converts had to become affiliated with an Arab tribe, and their status was subordinate. Then, equality for all Muslims was, in general, the achievement of the Abbasid revolution. So Islam was changed by different dynasties, right? So as these different rulers took over, they altered the deen to suit themselves politically. So the Islamic conquest was in the name of Islam, but its purpose was simply domination. Right. Now, later, the show mentioned that the Crusades were elicited by an appeal from the Roman Byzantine Emperor Alexius Comnenus, and that this had something to do with the Turks, and it failed to provide these specific details. Exactly what the Turks had been doing was, again, ignored, as as completely as the history of the Umayyads, and why one might have derived the impression that Turkey had always been in Anatolia, right? But that is not the case. So the advent of the Turks represented a major surge in Islamic conquest, and this was not made obvious. So anyway, I'll leave that here. So what happens is basically it's propaganda. They fail to say because they don't want to offend Muslims, because they want to pretend that Islam's religion of peace, and they don't want to offend the Muslims in their country, and therefore they gloss over the history and blame the Christians,
But
blame
that's what
the
Muhammad said. Muhammad said, "Who the best ruler in your ummah will be the one who will conquer Constantinople." Right? So how can you do a defensive war to conquer Constantinople?
that is very true. That is actually very, very true.
But once
Um,
again, yeah, that's logical. So I shouldn't bring logic. My bad. My bad.
that is true. So the idea that they want to spread is that people spontaneously converted when they heard the word of Islam. This is the
Really?
pretend.
Wallahi, that is awesome. I heard about Islam and I will convert to Islam spontaneously. Wallahi. I'm ready to take Shahada, brother.
Okay, well, you might want to hold on a minute, but that's great news. That's very good news.
Okay.
Okay, so now, so the Crusades. So let's talk about this. The Crusades were military expeditions during the Middle Ages that were conducted by European Catholics to defend Christian civilization from jihad. So let's look at the other side. Let's look at the propaganda that the other side would spread. So the Crusades developed as a result of the Christian world's long struggle with Islamic jihad. Okay, Muhammad formulated this concept of holy war, calling on Muslims to subjugate non-Muslims through warfare. So between AD 633 and 715, Arab armies conquered two-thirds of the Christian world, including Mesopotamia, Syria, the Holy Land, Egypt, all of North Africa, and Spain. Through the 8th and 11th centuries, Christian lands were constantly invaded by Muslims, and the Christians attempted to beat the Muslims back and recover lost territory. Most of the fighting took place in border regions between Christian and Muslim worlds, especially Spain, Italy, and what is now Turkey. Turkey was a Christian region known as Anatolia, ruled by the Eastern Orthodox Byzantine Empire. If you look at the New Testament, look at the letters of Paul that Paul sent to Antioch and all these other places, those places are now Islamized. Right? Paul sent those to Christian lands. Those lands are now Islamized. In the 10th century, a warlike people known as the Seljuk Turks converted to Islam, and they took power in the Muslim world. The Byzantines were eventually defeated by the Turks in 1071 at the Battle of Manzikert, losing almost all of Anatolia. Any
But
comments from you,
yeah,
Adam?
Paul was the apostle of Isa, and Isa was a Muslim. So Paul, when you say Paul went to Anatolia, he was spreading Islam way before Islam came there, or sorry, way before Muhammad came there. So
Right.
you know, you are not going through the logic, brother. You
No,
have to.
because yeah, I'm trying to be impartial. I'm trying to give both sides of the story here. Now,
Okay, okay.
understand this is the wall around the Vatican. This is the wall currently around the Vatican,
That's a
because
huge wall.
yeah, it's massive because the Vatican was invaded twice, and they built this wall in defense against the Muslims. All right, so let's continue. So this is an example. This is the Polish hussars who at the Battle of Vienna. This is what we're looking at here. Okay, now let's have a quick look at a list of European countries and territories that were attacked and or came under Muslim occupation. And sometimes they were occupied for centuries. Now remember, this is Islam expanding outwards, the religion of peace, going out and peacefully conquering and attacking, murdering, raping, pillaging, looting, and burning everybody. So let's
Dude,
have a
that's
look.
not rape. That's Allah's order. You can take the Malakat al Yameen, the right hand possessed woman, and you can have sex with. How dare you call it rape? It's not rape. Allah allowed it. You can have the female captive of war and do
Yeah,
ding dong with them without marriage. That's the allowance of
yeah.
Allah.
I know, but well, some people view that as wrong. So let's have a look. They invaded Albania in the 14th century, Armenia, Austria, Belarus, Bosnia Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Crete, Cyprus, 654 to 961. They were there for 300 years, okay, in Crete. They invaded Cyprus, Denmark. What were Muslim armies doing in Denmark?
They like
Denmark,
Den- they like Denmark. That's why they went there.
France. Georgia, Greece, Hungary, Iceland. Okay, they invaded Iceland of all things in 1627. They invaded
Iceland is green.
Ireland. They invaded Ireland. They invaded Ireland, Baltimore. In Baltimore, they went and kidnapped women and children. Crazy. They invaded Israel. Okay, in 637, 750, 970 to 983, 1024 to 1077. They invaded Italy, Lithuania, Macedonia, Malta, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Russia, Sardinia, Serbia, Sicily, the U. This is not even a full list. This is not even a complete list. Spain and the Ukraine. Okay,
And
so
these people tried to attack Muslimin, brother.
but when did Denmark invade the Middle East?
They sent their holy angels to attack
Yeah, well,
Middle East.
yeah. When did the Lithuanians invade the Middle East? When did the Irish of all people, when did they invade the Middle East? Right. So understand there's some serious issues here. Let's have a brief look at the jihad timeline from 630 to 1095. In 630, Muhammad conquers Mecca from Medina with 30,000 men. In 632, he dies. Okay. And in 636, there's the Muslim conquest of Syria and the surrounding lands, all Christian, including Palestine and Iraq. 637, you have Muslim Crusaders, they conquer Iraq, then they conquer Jerusalem, taking it from the Byzantines. In 638, they conquer Iran. 642, they conquer Egypt. 641, Syria and Palestine. Then they conquer all of North Africa. Then here, they conquer Cyprus, Tripoli in North Africa, and establish Islamic rule in Iran, Afghanistan, and what is now India. Then they besiege Constantinople. And in 691, the Dome of the Rock is completed. Now remember, Muhammad went from the Dome of the Rock in 630, whatever it was, on his little horsey to heaven because there was a mosque in Jerusalem. But the mosque was only finished in 691, 60 years after Muhammad died. But Muhammad time traveled from the mosque in Jerusalem.
See, that approves the Quran that time travel is possible. Muhammad did the time travel back in 620s, 28 or something. Muhammad
Yeah,
did that time travel. It is possible. You guys cannot destroy Quran. Muhammad was a time traveler.
he was the first time traveler. Yeah. So then they conquer the lower Indus Valley in the 700s, and then Muslim Crusaders conquer Spain, right? And they impose the kingdom of Andalus. So the Muslim conquest then moves from Spain further into Europe. In 718, the conquest of Spain is complete. In the 732, the Muslim invasion of France is stopped at the Battle of Poitiers, the Battle of Tours. So the Franks, under their leader Charles Martel, who's the grandfather of Charlemagne, defeats the Muslims and he turns them out of France. 762, Baghdad, right, is founded. Then in 785, the Great Mosque of Cordoba. 789, you have Muslim Crusaders in Morocco. And then, of course, Christophoros, a Muslim who converted to Christianity, is executed. And then, of course, you've got Tunisia, and it goes on, and it goes on. In 813, they started attacking Christians in Palestine, many of whom fled the country, right? They then capture, in 831, the Muslim Crusaders capture Palermo, Italy, right? And then they start raids in southern Italy where they start kidnapping the women. And then, of course, you've got Sicily, Corsica, Italy, and France attacked again. And then, of course, you have the revolt of the black slaves in Iraq in 869. And it just goes on and on and on. In 937, the Church of the Resurrection is burned down by Muslims, and more churches in Jerusalem are attacked. And it just goes on and on and on. And don't forget, all of this happened until 1095, when Pope Urban II preached the First Crusade, and the crusade then captures Jerusalem 4 years later. So
Okay, okay, okay,
understand, listen, yeah.
okay. Hold on, hold on. All of these countries and cities and everything that you're mentioning over here, brother. All of them, they had issues. They were not doing good. They were doing worshipping of idols, and these people were not good people. So Islam went there to preach Islam.
Well, because remember, we're all born Muslims, so they have to come and teach us Islam because we're not Muslims, because we're not practicing Muslims, but we're born, whatever. Um, so Kagito Odo says they are all born Muslims, so the war is to revert them. Actually, no, the war is, yes, well, two things. The war is to force them back into Islam, right? So the war is certainly done to convert them. However, the war is also, if they're killed, the other benefit is that it removes the wickedness, the evil from you. Killing you removes your evil from the world. Okay.
See, then you go to Jannah.
Yeah. No, because your soul brings corruption. Your lack of faith brings corruption, and that corruption must be removed by the sword. So that's another reason why they would do this. So these are the Islamic Crusades. This was the jihad against Christendom. There were 1,200 years of conquest. Okay, so let's have a look. There were 548 battles against Christendom, and this led to the destruction of classical civilization. For instance, few people are aware, but the the European journeys of discovery, for instance, when Vasco da Gama, when they went south to find the spice route to India, it's because the old routes overland were no longer possible because Muslims raiders would, just like Muhammad was a caravan robber, his caravan robber, followers would simply just start robbing the caravans, would start plundering,
La
right?
hawla wala
And
quwwata illa billah. Astaghfirullahi min kulli zambin wa atubu alayh. How dare you call Muhammad a caravan robber? He
because
is
he
the
was
best
one,
example for every mankind. He
it's the
was,
best
he was,
example of caravan robbing.
no,
So,
la hawla wala quwwata. He was blessing them with his hand.
well, Well, like Christopher Columbus, right? So Christopher Columbus had to find a route as well. He founded the Americas. He was also trying to find a way to India, again, because the original traditional routes were blocked off by the Muslims, right? The Dark Ages was actually started by the Muslims simply because the trade from North Africa and the areas that Europe used to trade with fell by 80% because there was this blockade of the piracy of the Muslims. They were destroying the universities, they were destroying the books, they were destroying the monasteries where the learning was taking place and the records were being kept. They were plundering the ships. They were taking everything they could find, and Europe fell into poverty. So the Muslims actually started the Dark Ages. I know there's the story of the Visigoths and all that, but
Yeah, but
really
like
Muslims. Yeah,
In Egypt library, the early library of Egypt, the biggest library of Egypt, where you had the
yep.
manuscripts of the Old Testament and the New Testament, the very, very old manuscripts. When
It burned them all.
it was being burned. The Muslims were trying to extinguish the fire. They were trying their best to extinguish the fire, but they just could not extinguish the fire.
Well, they also started the fire, you know.
Okay, no, no, no,
So
no, no, no. You can't read that part. How dare you can read? How dare you read that part that they started the fire? That part you cannot read. You have to read the part that they tried to save people
no, I'm
from
no,
that
I'm
library.
providing the hate facts. I'm just providing the hate facts that are commonly presented. The hate facts. So yeah, what we're going to do now, I'm going to show this. This is a full 5 minute section of the video from Bill Warner, which discusses and shows you the Islamic Crusades, the invasions, the hundreds of battles that eventually led to the conquest out of Arabia, across North Africa, into Asia, and into Europe, right? And so we can see the history of this in real time. So Adam, maybe we should just pause it sometimes, and you can provide comment.
Uh,
Otherwise, it's about 4 minutes
by the
of.
way, did you enable the voice when you were sharing the checkbox
No,
on
I
the
did
bottom
not.
left?
Shall I do that
So you
quickly?
have to do that again. Yes, unshare it and share it again. And the bottom left corner, you have share audio as well before you click share screen.
Share audio. Will do.
Yes.
Okay, we'll now be sharing audio, so I'm going to start playing this, right, guys? So let's watch.
If you see a lot of sunken ships, there was a lot of ships sailing around. When they go down, the economy goes down. So from this data, we know a lot. And this, in particular, the database of ancient documents gives us 548 battles that Islam fought against the classical world. This is all new information. I've talked with people who consider themselves history buffs, and they go, well, let's see, battles of Islam against Europe. Let's see, we've got invasion, we have tour.
Brother Lloyd,
Yep.
I muted you because the voice was doubling, echoing. Can you just
Oh,
restart and then play and mute yourself when you play because the voice was echoing.
If
Okay,
you
and
see a lot of
yeah,
sunken ships, there was a lot of ships sailing around. When they go down, the economy goes down. So from this data, we know a lot. And this, in particular, the database of ancient documents gives us 548 battles that Islam fought against the classical world. This is all new information. I've talked with people who consider themselves history buffs, and they go, well, let's see, battles of Islam against Europe. Let's see, we've got the invasion, we got Tours, we got the invasion of at Gibraltar, we've got Lepanto, Gates of Vienna, collapse of, okay, that's 5. You talk to a historian.
I'll pause there for a moment. Notice people speak of the First Crusade, the Second Crusade. The Muslims conducted at least 548 battles, as we will see. Now, notice the Second Crusade was 12 defensive battles, the third, 7, and so on. These are very, very few versus over 500 battles, right? And we'll see that the Crusades delayed the invasion of Europe by something like 200 years, allowing Europe time to recover and strengthen and then fight back against the Islamic Jihad. I'll mute myself again.
And those are the 5 battles they can scratch up. And I remind you, you can have all of these slides if you just send me an email for it. Okay, what does this new data show us? It shows us this. See the white spots? They're brand new battles. They're going to change to red. These are new. Every time, I want to show you this all over again. Every tick is 20 years. The new battles for that 20-year period come up in white, then they fade to red to show you the history. So white's what's happening right now, red has happened. Let's see how these 548 battles act out over. We're going to watch in 70 seconds, we're going to watch 1,200 years of conquest. Look how fast this is happening. Bam! Here comes. You didn't know France was hammered that hard, did you? You heard of Tours. Watch what's happening in Spain and the islands. Now, many of these raids or battles, if they're at the coastline, are slave raids. The slaving that took place in here was extensive and went on and on. All of this work is also happening now then. We're now into the golden age of Baghdad. This is the punishment that's being handed out to Christians everywhere. In Spain, after one battle, there were knights' heads were cut off, and they made a pile so high.
Notice you've seen that the number of attacks in France, right? You've got this huge number of attacks in France. We mentioned Tours, the Battle of Tours, but there were many, many more. Notice how they've expanded out of Arabia. They've attacked 1, 2, 3, 4, and at the time, there were different geographical maps, but they've attacked a number of countries within a very short period of time.
The man on horseback couldn't see over them. All of the European civilization in North Africa is now gone. Now, pretty soon, and by the way, there will be a period of time, and you can see the clock running up here, there will be a brief blip of 5 battles that occur in North Africa, the Barbary Pirate Wars. We're on there. Okay?
wow.
Now then, Byzantium has fallen. Now then, Eastern Europe is being hammered.
So notice they've gone into Eastern Europe. They've gone into Hungary, Romania. How is this defensive if they're attacking Hungary, Austria, Romania, Serbia? These countries never, ever went into Arabia. So how can they claim these are all defensive? This was conquest and expansion because Islam is it's a religion of war.
Notice that it is relentless. It doesn't stop. This is the history that you're never told about. This is the history that explains how all of this came about. Now then, they're getting slower because Islam is becoming weaker. Corruption. All empires collapse from the inside ultimately. Okay. I say that what caused the collapse of classical civilization was not the invading German barbarian tribes. I say that classical civilization was destroyed by Islam.
Wow. Yes, that's
Okay.
a. And in the same video, he actually had a dialogue that the Crusaders were far too late and far too few. Like, I
Yeah.
could never forget that one single sentence which describes Crusaders in full essence. They were far too late, they were far too few. And you have seen how much land Muslims occupied in their so called defensive wall.
Corruption.
Yes. Yeah. This is a huge amount of territory that they conquered. I'm just going back here. That's a huge amount of territory that they have conquered here. So understand all of this, just about everything you see. Iran was Persian, of course, and Zoroastrian. Afghanistan was Buddhist. But basically, everything else that you see was effectively Christian land. So all that is left is this little bit of Europe up here. And they are trying to take this as well. Understand? They're trying to take this. And the only reason that this still survives is the Catholic Church. And it's amazing that people have such issues. I'm not a Catholic, so I don't have any particular dog in the fight. But just from a historical point of view, it's very strange that people have such animosity when the Catholic Church fought hard to defend what it could. And yeah, your
So,
thoughts?
so all these so-called evangelic Christians who says that fighting is you can't fight, Crusaders were wrong. They are all bunch of ignorant people who does not know what was happening.
I would say so, yeah. And also, someone mentioned the date of 9/11. Cogito Ogo mentioned, but I was going to cover that later. But yeah, I would say they're very, very wrong. I've seen many, and I would have to call these very, very ignorant conspiracy theories that claim that Islam was founded by the Catholic Church because they needed a reason to, fight against the blah blah blah. Which of course is very interesting when you speak to other conspiracy theorists who tell that Islam was created by the Jews, and you speak to others who say that Islam was created by the Illuminati, and then you read from another group that Islam was created by the Swiss, who were involved in their own little campaigns. And then you're like, okay, so which one is it, guys? Right?
Brother, I was about to recite Shahada like 15 minutes ago. What are you doing to me? Like,
Sorry,
come on, man. I was getting ready to recite Shahada and get 72 versions in heaven.
Well, okay. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. But so yeah, but just to the point that Gita Oga made, the Muslims were finally effectively kicked out of Europe. Well, it took 16 years. Okay, but September the 11th, 1683, the Polish army under the leadership of King Jan Sobieski arrived on the Kahlenberg above Vienna, and he surveyed the encampment of the Turkish army. And what he said when he stood on the hill was actually, "This man is badly encamped. Surely we will defeat him." Right? And the Polish army, along with 15,000 cavalry and three light cavalry and 3,000 heavy cavalry, the Polish hussars, they smashed. Right? They smashed the Turkish army, and they drove them out of Europe. Right. Unfortunately, peace was only signed, I believe, in 1699 or something like that. So it took a very long time. But the Polish army smashed them and pushed them out. Now you're looking at an army of like 60 to 80,000 people that was up against an army of about 240,000. So they were outnumbered by at least 3-1 or 4-1, and yet they still won that battle decisively. So, the Polish army arrived on September the 11th, and at 4 a.m. on the morning of September the 12th, they attacked. So the reason that Osama bin Laden chose the date of September the 11th to attack New York, right, the Twin Towers, was because September the 11th is symbolic of the day that Islam was still dominant in the world, that Islam was about to topple Christendom. Because once they took Vienna, they were going to then take Rome. Nothing could stop them anymore, right? So this was the date. He was rolling the clock back to the day before Islam fell in Europe. So just you know that.
Hmm.
Villadis has
Interesting.
put Sabaton. Yes. Okay. But more on that later. So, in the 7th century, Muslims invaded and they took control of Jerusalem. In the 11th century, they began to hassle and they killed and they molested Christian pilgrims near Jerusalem. The Muslim Turks even attacked Rome and Belgrade in 1456. So the Crusades were in response to the cries of help from the Eastern Byzantine Empire, which worried about the military threat from the Seljuk Turks. And if the Christians did not respond, Muslims would have conquered all of Europe and they would have wiped Christianity from the planet by force. So the Islamic high water mark in Europe ended when they were defeated at Vienna on September the 11th, 1683. So in AD 1009, Caliph Hakam of Egypt ordered the destruction of the Holy Sepulchre and all Christian places of worship in Jerusalem. So again, this was also a response ultimately to the fact that the Muslims were destroying the Holy Land. Right, this was of importance to Christianity, and therefore they had to do something. If they'd done nothing, they would have wiped out and totally Islamized Jerusalem. So pilgrims were attacked and Christians were persecuted. So I'm just going to mention this is a speech from Pope Urban II to Christians from this Crusader era. Now, the church deliberated heavily before they decided to launch. It took years for them to decide to do this. Remember, they were late by 463 years. But they still took 4 years to think about this before they went because they wanted to have, they thought, how can we justify going to war? And they had to come up with a doctrine they called the just war. But so, for your brethren who live in the East are in urgent need of your help, and you must hasten to give them the aid which has often been promised to them. For as most of you have heard, the Turks and Arabs have attacked them and have conquered the territory of Romania, the Greek Empire, as far west as the shore of the Mediterranean and the Hellespont, which is called the Arm of St. George. They've occupied more and more of the lands of those Christians who have overcome them in 7 battles. They have killed and captured many and have destroyed the churches and devastated the empire. On that point, I want you to note that if you look at Egypt and you look at the Mediterranean shore of Africa, there were 10,000 churches. Today, there are roughly 0. Right? 10,000 churches gone, destroyed by Islam. Right? If you permit them to continue thus for a while with impunity, the faithful of God will be much more widely attacked by them. On this account, I, or rather the Lord, I ask you as Christ's heralds to publish this everywhere and to persuade all people, whatever rank, foot soldiers and knights, poor and rich, to carry aid promptly to those Christians and to destroy that vile race from the lands of our friends. So this was the plea that he put out, and people answered. People responded because Christianity at the time wasn't made up of a bunch of wimpy liberals, right?
And I would agree with you on that because the if you read the biblical account, you
Yeah,
were given the sword, right? Jesus did said Jesus did said put your sword down because the one who live by the sword die by the sword.
yeah. But
But
he did say,
he
carry a sword. All the apostles carried swords.
exactly, and then he also said that now that I'm going, even if you have a cloak, sell it and buy a sword. So you should keep the sword. So when it comes to defense, Christianity does not rejects defense, but it does stops you from offending, offensive
Well,
war.
Christianity doesn't legislate the way Islam does. It is not a religion of law. Judaism is a religion of law. Islam is even more so a religion of law. Christianity does not make secular law, right? However, according to Christian doctrine, we must respect the laws that we create because those laws should be moral and just. And if that law says defend your lands, okay, secure your borders, and repel invaders, then that is, and if that is a lawful and legal and moral law made by your government, you should follow that.
Brother,
So therefore,
brother,
yeah,
Bible clearly says that you have to save the oppressed. If you are not saving the oppressed, you're saving your neighbor, saving your children, saving your women, you are not doing what you are supposed to do. So when these Muslims are attacking and taking the women as sex slaves and killing the men and children as young as 9 or 10 because they didn't had their pubic hair on the pubic hairs. Like, come on, man. If you are not even going to stand up for this injustice, then you are not even a Christian. That's
No,
how I
because
look at it.
you are permitting evil. You're allowing
Exactly.
evil. And I don't think so. Look, no, you cannot. At some point, you have to stand up to evil because you are there, because you are permitting evil to do harm and to do wrong to others, to violate morals and to violate the law against others. So unfortunately, no. Now, I will make a side detour now into a little bit of slavery, and we can talk a little bit about Islamic slavery, which is connected to this. But yeah, I'm glad we share the same opinion on this. This is very important. So understand. Okay, let's look at Islamic slavery, right? The untold story. This is a summary of this issue. Slavery, I can do in a separate show in great detail, but for now, including the laws on slavery, which is disgusting because Islam has never abolished slavery. Muslims will tell you Muhammad was the first to abolish slavery. No, he sold a slave or two or three, but he owned like 60. So he sold a couple of slaves, and it's okay to sell one or two slaves. He made a profit or he made a favor or something. But between the 15th and 18th centuries alone, right, approximately 5 million Europeans were abducted and enslaved in the name of jihad. So, in other words, Africans coming from North Africa went to Europe and took back at least 5 million Europeans, right? So, they were taking women and children, the men, obviously, to induct into their armies or to use as slaves to work, and the women, of course, as sex slaves. Right? They took the best looking women from Europe. They loved blondes. They had a thing for blondes. That's why they were in Denmark and Norway and all these places, Poland, because they liked good looking blonde women, right? Because they wanted them for sex. So
Yes.
now understand, people go on about the fact that, 500,000 black slaves, approximately now, the exact numbers are not known. We're looking at 350,000 to 500,000 black slaves were taken on the Atlantic slave trade. And everyone loses their mind over the Atlantic slave trade. 350,000 to 500,000 went to North America. Now, of course, they say America, but let's be more specific. North America includes Canada, North America, and South America, like Brazil, Argentina, and so on. So you're looking at a certain number of slaves went to Canada, a certain number of slaves went to America, right? Roughly 300,000. And then you're looking at the number that people forget. So of that 500,000, approximately 360, that went to America and Canada, North America and Canada, okay? Of course, they forget the other 14.5 million blacks, 14.5 million that went to South America, to Brazil and other countries. So I have no idea why they go on about the 300,000 or so that went to North America, but forget the 14.5 million that went to the black people and the brown people in South America who were also buying slaves. They also forget to mention that the people capturing the slaves were black and Muslim, and the people selling the slaves were exclusively black and Muslim. So I don't know why they leave out these little factoids. Any comments from you, Adam?
Uh, you're absolutely right on that part. But there are certain things that you said in a very casual manner. When you talk about these slave women, what is their power? What is their right? Do you know that?
None.
None. And how do they wear something?
Look, if you look at the illustrations, look at the artworks, you'll find they're usually naked.
Exactly, because their clothing area is between the belly button and the knees. This is small deviation because you showed it, so I'm gonna give a little small deviation. Umar used to beat slave women if they will wear proper clothes. There are multiple narrations. I'm going to read a couple of them. Umar struck her with his switch until she dropped the loose end of her robe from her head. So Muhammad asked the slave woman in the street, "You are a slave woman. Why are you wearing proper clothing?" and she did not remove it. So what did he do? He beat her. Another one, he said Umar bin al-Khattab would not permit any slave woman to wail. He would say the veil is only for free women, so they would not be harassed. So you should be harassed. You are slaves, and you should never wear anything like that. Another one, Umar said, have your master manumitted you, made you free? She answered in negative. He asked then, why are you wearing a robe? Robe, robe, robe. Put aside it. When she refused, he hit her with his switch until she complained, proclaiming, do not imitate free women ever again. Do not imitate free women ever again. Another narration, noticed that there was a woman in the house wearing a robe. When he saw, he laughed. He's like, get out. Why do you dress them as your free woman? Okay. Now, in Umar's own house, look what is happening. Malik reported the slave women of Umar used to serve us with their heads uncovered, their breasts knocking together, and their anklets exposed. So they were not wearing any tops. They were not wearing any top. They these are the way that you keep your slave women. So all of these Christian slave women that these people were attacking and making them slaves, they were their sex slaves. Number one, you can perform any kind of sex with them, any master,
Mm.
without marriage. They have no right to wear any kind of proper clothing, none of the proper clothing. They cannot have it. Their breasts were like banging with each other in Umar's home and so many other people's home. Their breast was knocking together. Everyone would see them. This is what these people went through when when Crusaders started their attacks. They were far too few and they were far too low. They were far too few and far too late. That's slavery in Islam, brother.
Right. I mean, it's this just shows you how, and I say this, and I mean this. Islam is filthy. You
La hawla
realize
wala
what they
quwwata.
did.
La hawla wala quwwata. How dare you say that, man? Islam is the best religion. It gives freedom to free the slaves, man. These are all Islamophobe websites. Umar was Islamophobe. Abu Bakr was Islamophobe. All the Khulafai Rashidin were Islamophobe. Everyone were Islamophobe.
Yeah.
Islam is peace and it does not allow slavery.
Obviously, Muslims have to believe it's illegal for them to believe that Islam is not perfect. And if they must believe that Islam is not perfect, they can be killed. So therefore, they have to blame everyone else. So now understand. So you're looking at 5 million Europeans who were enslaved by Black Africans and Muslims, right? And people are moaning about 500,000 slaves that went west, and they forget that 10 times more than that were taken by Africans. Africans enslaved at least 10 times more people, at least 10 times more than Africans were enslaved by Westerners. Understand that. And the majority of the countries that they were attacking had no slavery, had no African slaves, right? So no one knows how many were kidnapped during the great Arab slave raids in Europe between the poorly documented 8th and 11th century. Right, the largest Islamic army ever to invade European territory, which is about 225,000. Now, the numbers will vary depending on the source you read. Okay, these are jihadis that came as late as 1683 to conquer Vienna and then Rome, but they failed. They were stopped by an army led by the Polish king Jan III Sobieski. Now, understand the Polish more than once in history, more than once, have bankrupted themselves to save Europe, and they bankrupted themselves and they became weak and were conquered because of it. So, even as the Ottoman Empire was beginning its slow retreat from Eastern Europe, the Muslim slavers of the so-called Barbary states of North Africa wreaked havoc all along the coasts of Europe, reaching as far as Iceland. And what did they do in Iceland? They went and took slaves. Now,
No,
let's have a
come
look.
on, brother. No, no, no. Come on. Why would they? No, that's
Oh,
not
sorry, they
true,
were
brother.
retaliating because the people from Iceland invaded Mecca. I forgot.
Ah,
I
okay,
forgot.
yeah,
I forgot.
yeah,
I forget.
yeah.
Iceland got on boats. They rowed the little boats all the way to Arabia, and they attacked the Kaaba, and the Muslims decided to just get on their pirate ships and attack Iceland because of revenge. Yeah.
Ah, see, now that narrative makes sense. Now you are not Islamophobe.
Sorry. Yeah, I remember. I'll try not to forget. So now understand. Here you're looking at the foundation of the U.S. Marines. Why were the U.S. Marines started? Well, the U.S. Marines were started to fight Islam, right? Because why? Because the Islamic Barbary pirates had America by the short and curlies. They were extorting money and they were bleeding America dry, right? So this is Tripoli, the United States' first war on terror. The book. Let's have a little read about. Let's understand some of this. The United States of America's first war, the very first war which it fought before it could even elect its first president, was against Islamic slavers, against the Islamic slave trade. When Thomas Jefferson and John Adams asked Barbary's ambassador why his countrymen were enslaving American sailors, because they were attacking the boats, capturing the sailors, and then saying, okay, give us $1 million, we'll give you your sailors back. Okay. The ambassador answered us that it was founded on their laws, right? So that their actions of piracy and slavery was founded on the laws of their prophet, the Sharia. That was written in the Quran, that it was their right and their duty to make war upon the non-Muslims wherever they could be found and to make slaves of all they could take as prisoners. This was the answer from the ambassador in Washington. Okay.
But okay, really? Okay.
Okay, so let's have a look at some books that discuss this. You have Brian Kilmeade, Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates, The Forgotten War That Changed American History. You have Jefferson's War, America's First War on Terror by Joseph Whelan. That was 1801 to 1805, and To the Shores of Tripoli, which is part of the hymn of the Marines, right? The Birth of the U.S. Navy and the Marines by ABC Whipple. So, as we saw, okay, in the earlier video, what we today call the West is merely the westernmost remnant, what is left, what remains, what has survived of what was a much larger, much more extensive civilization that Islam permanently cut off. Now, understand, imagine that all of that area was Christian, right? All of that area would have been like Europe. All of that area would have been as developed as Europe, because the Christian civilization would have made that a highly developed area. But if you look at it, it's an, as people would say, an S-hole, right? Because Islam is dysfunctional. So centuries of non-stop jihad and terror saw 3/4 of the post-Roman Christian world become Islamic, leaving the remaining quarter, today's Europe, in a permanent state of siege. And don't get me wrong, Europe is in a state of siege. They are coming. They are interested,
And
right?
they are coming back right now.
And they're coming back, and they're just walking across the border.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and of course, yeah. So what you've got is you've got a tiny Europe, right? A very tiny Europe. Now, Europe's self-identity did not historically revolve around ethnicity or language. It revolved around the religion, the common culture of Christianity. So this small corner of the Eurasian landmass, Europe, houses dozens of both languages and ethnicities, right? Some are very divergent, and there are much larger land masses which are homogeneous, right? So Europe's identity evolved from a common religion. It was this last and most formidable bastion of Christendom that was not conquered by Islam. And today they are trying to conquer it by anything less, by methods other than, shall we say, kinetic warfare, than direct warfare. One of the best books on the subject is Raymond. I'd love to meet and talk with Raymond Ibrahim. So his book Sword and Scimitar, 14 Centuries of War Between Islam and the West. He's one of the finest scholars, Egyptian, Arab, Christian, and speaks fluent Arabic, of course, and a brilliant scholar. And yeah, so he speaks of this. So understand that the Marines were founded specifically as a force to stop the Muslims from extorting the jizya from America. They were bankrupting the country, and they had to fight. So they went to Tripoli to stop this war, right? And yeah, that's why the Marines got started. That's why the American Navy got started, specifically to fight Islam, which was fighting America.
Wow, wow, wow. You are going places, man. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
By the
So
way, I have one more question over here before you move forward, then I will remove
sure.
slavery from here at all. Uh,
Okay.
this Allison, I can't even pronounce his first name. I guess underwear bras are not a thing. underwire bras are not a thing yet. They put all this filth in writing for all to read. Wow.
Mhm.
I think he's not watching my channel. There is a video where Arab scholars in satellite channel are telling about the the uh, the satar. The satar means the clothing of female slaves, and let's play that. It's 2 minutes, not too long. I
Sure.
think you guys will know what the reality of the situation is underlined, because now I showed you an English translation. All the links are there, but now listen to how these Arabs nowadays Muslim scholars on live satellite TV are saying the it's in Arabic, that the subtitles will give the answer, but I will stop and pause in the middle and will give you the answer. Check this out.
فأصبح المرأة الأمة فيها 3 مذاهب. المذهب الأول الظاهرية، وقول عند الشافعية عورتها كعورة الحرة. المذهب الثاني مذهب الجمهور، عورتها مناصير الركبة. المذهب الثالث قال به الإمام مالك والإمام أبو حنيفة، وقول أيضا عند الحنابلة في رواية إن ما عدا الأطراف، يعني الرأس ليس عورة والذراعين والساقين ليس عورة في المرأة هي الأمة. ولهم دليل في حديث رواه البيهقي ورواه الدارقطني، واحد عن عمرو بن شعبة عن أبيه عن جده أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: إذا باع أحدكم عبده أو أمته فلا ينظر إلى عورتها من موضع الإزار إلى الركبة. وحديث ثاني:
So if one of you sells or buy a slave, they cannot look at the nakedness of that slave female, and the nakedness of that slave female is from the belly button, the place of the belt, the belly button, to the knees. That's it. So the chest, the breasts, and everything of a female slave is touchable, feelable, watchable, and nothing.
إزار إلى الركبة. وحديث ثاني رواه برضه البيهقي عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: من اشترى جارية فلينظر إليها ولا ينظر إلى عورتها، وعورتها من معقل الإزار إلى الركبة.
So Prophet Muhammad by himself said that this is what you can do, and you can look at it, not the exact private part, the rest you can.
ملك اليمين هحكي لحضرتك عليها دلوقتي. بس الاول حجاب ملك اليمين زيها زي الرجل، لحديث رسول الله عليه الصلاه والسلام: عوره الرجل ما بين سرته وركبته، وعوره الامه كعوره الرجل، هي زيها زي الرجل.
الامه دي
اللي هي ملك اليمين. لو دارت ما بين السره والركبه بعد كده هي حره تظهر ما تظهر وتغطي اللي تغطي.
وفوق السره
مش عوره.
مش عوره.
Look how the lady who is taking the interview is being surprised by this.
حديث رسول الله: وعورة الأمة كعورة الرجل. خلاص، يعني حضرتك انت قاعدة ما شاء الله اهو كشف شعرك.
So from the belly button to the knees, that's it. And she's surprised. The one who's taking the interview, she does not know what's happening. She is mind blown.
جزء من دراعك باين، جزء من صدرك باين، كل ده حلال لملك اليمين.
So he said you are showing your hairs, you are showing your hands, you are exposing your face. This is haram for you as a free. But look what the female says.
حرام للي ما هياش ملك يمين.
And he said for Malik Yamin, mean right hand possess, it's not haram. But look what she says.
بس
انا كفي باين، شعري باين، بس حضرتك بتقول مصيبه. تقول فوق السره مش حرام يعني.
She's saying, you are talking about my hands, my face, my hair. Come on, what you are saying is a disaster. What you are saying is that from the belly button up, a slave woman will not wear anything. From a belly button up, she will not wear anything.
يعني لو الست لبست مثلا جوب ونزلت الشارع يبقى كده عادي.
لملك اليمين
اه
حلال ولا شيء عليها.
For Milk al Yamin, she's just wearing a skirt, and that's all about it. This is the slave, and you are telling me that Crusaders were wrong in responding back to these invaders who were taking the women, Christian girls, Christian babies, because over 9 years of age is all Malak al Yamin. So you are telling me that they did a wrong thing by stopping these people from doing all this to your woman? Any evangelic or non-evangelic or whoever is either a Christian or even a human being, an atheist, a Hindu, a Jew, whoever that person is, if they do not condemn this, they are not even humans. They are not even humans. And this is why Crusaders came up, Brother Lloyd.
You know, there's a group of Catholic monks. They were called the Ransomers. Okay, so what they would do is they would collect money because the pilgrims to the Holy Land, the Christian pilgrims, were kidnapped and obviously enslaved, or they were just held in prison, and then their families would have to pay money to let them come out, pay a ransom to allow them to be freed. So these monks would go and collect money. They would beg for money. They would find ways to raise the funds, and they would go to the Holy Land. They would go to these Muslim slavers, and they would pay the money over to get Christians out of prison, out of these camps, out of the slavery. And if need be, they would take the risk of themselves being enslaved, or perhaps even offer themselves to be enslaved in the place of these Christians. So, and again, these are the Catholics, those evil Catholics that I hear people talk about so often. And people don't realize the debt of gratitude they do owe to the Catholic Church from a purely factual and historical point of view, right? When you start to study the history correctly. So there were Christians who sacrificed themselves, their lives, they risked everything to go and free people who were being crucified, terrorized, who were being imprisoned and made into sex slaves. And Islam wants to bring this back. Right. So this is the most horrific thing. So yeah, shall we continue with some more of this?
Yes, brother. Yes, brother. Let's start
Yeah,
again.
it's just horrific. Oh, okay. So now in 1993, okay, in 1993, Samuel Huntington said in a book, The Clash of Civilizations, he said that Islam has bloody borders. And as someone mentioned earlier in the chat, don't forget, Islam divides the world into the Dar al-Islam, the House of Islam, the Dar al-Harb, right, the House of War. Anything that is not Islamic territory is the House of War. You are part of, right now, where you're sitting, if you're not in an Islamic country, you are sitting in the House of War, and Islam must make war upon you. How they define war might differ. It's not necessarily what we'd call kinetic warfare, but they must conquer. Okay, they must convert you by force or by persuasion somehow. So in Eurasia, the great historic fault lines between civilizations are once more aflame. This is particularly true along the boundaries of the crescent-shaped Islamic bloc of nations, from the bulge of Africa to Central Asia. Violence also occurs between Muslims on the one hand and Orthodox Serbs in the Balkans, Jews in Israel, Hindus in India, Buddhists in Burma, and Catholics in the Philippines. Islam has bloody borders. Right? Because the Muslims are fighting the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Catholics, the Serbs, they're fighting everybody. As historian Bernard Lewis wrote, for almost 1,000 years, from the first Moorish landing in Spain in 711 to the second Turkish siege of Vienna in 1683, Europe was under constant threat from Islam. All but the easternmost provinces of the Islamic realm had been taken from Christian rulers. Right? North Africa, Egypt, Syria, even Persian-ruled Iraq had been Christian countries in which Christianity was older and more deeply rooted than in most of Europe, right? And they were abandoned for 400 years by Europe. Their loss was sorely felt and heightened the fear that a similar fate was in store for Europe as wave after wave of Islamic attacks crashed against the continent. Right
Okay,
after
also,
Europe
brother,
neutralized. Yeah,
while you are showing this, we have a Muslima. She's saying, Adam Seeker, do you know real Muslim and real Islam? You need to see
yes, we do.
interview with a real Muslim by stop spamming. Like imagine. So what she's saying that all the Khulafai Rashidin, all the golden era of the Muslimin, Muhammad himself and all of his followers, they were all not real Muslims. And
No,
she's the one who has some real Muslim that I should talk with.
yeah, no. I mean, if you show her the Sharia, she has to deny it, right? She has to lie about it. So yeah, I mean, tonight I'm not going into the Sharia in any depth. I will do
Yeah.
it
We
later,
don't need to.
but
Right now, this is already too much. She has to tell us which which person did wrong in this, or did they all wrong, because
yeah,
we already showed what
no,
they did.
she should just show us from the fiqh how any of this violates her fiqh. You
Yeah,
know, just show us where. Show us the fiqh manual. Tell us the scholar and which book this violates the fiqh. Show us, and then we'll be happy to have a look. Now, Europe managed to neutralize Islam, and then it forgot about it. So, historian Hilaire Belloc observed during the peak of Western might and Muslim weakness, millions of modern people of the white civilization, that is the civilization of Europe and America, have forgotten about Islam. They have never come in contact with it. They take for granted that it is decaying and that anyway it is just a foreign religion which will not concern them. It is the most formidable and persistent enemy which our civilization has had, and may at any moment become as large a menace in the future as it has been in the past. Now, worse than forgetting, as I started earlier, the West has rewritten history to fit postmodern liberal paradigms that they themselves are lying to themselves that Islam is peace when Islam is nothing but warfare and slavery. In fact, as we said, Islam has at least just in terms of how many people they've stolen from Europe, 10 times the slavery count of the West that took slaves to America. If you look at the Islamic slave trade, if we do a separate show on just the Islamic slave trade, you will see that Islamic slavery is at least 60 million people, if not more. 60 million. And they want to lose their lunch. They want to tie their little panties in a knot over 350,000 slaves that went from Africa to North America. And they want us to ignore the 60 to maybe 80 million slaves that they took to Saudi Arabia, of which at least 80% died, right? And notice there are still no black people. Saudi Arabia is not black because why? They castrated the men. They
exactly.
didn't
I
allow
was
them to
about to
breed,
say that. A
killed
lot
the
of
babies. Yeah,
yeah,
go
a
ahead.
lot of a lot of men, they died because they chopped off their male
Yep,
private part, like literally chopped off their male private part. And and that is the only way the guy can actually, the male person, the male slave, can get into a dwelling place of a female Muslima, if he is like that person. So and only way for him to accompany a female Muslima outside, so they would like cut off the thing. And
yep. And they would murder the babies. If a slave woman had a baby, they'd kill it. So this is brutal. Understand that the Crusades were critically necessary. If the Crusades had not happened, Europe would have been defeated. Right now, understand history books lie as well. They contribute to this distorted, false idea. They speak of the Arabs, the Moors, the Ottomans, the Tatars. They don't say Muslims because you don't want to offend Islam, do you? Now, they fail to mention that the doctrine of jihad created this warfare, created this violence. They fail to speak of the fact that Islam has never abolished slavery, that Muhammad was a massive slave trader. So, okay, so now, is it just history? No, because the Sharia is eternal. The Quran is eternal, right? So now Muslims still exhibit the same imperial impulse because remember, Islam is just Arab imperialism. It's just Arab imperialism. And they are intolerant and they are supremacists. They are Arab supremacists. Now, reported 215 million Christians are experiencing high levels of persecution officially acknowledged as a genocide in the Islamic world, right? And others are experiencing a genocide in the name of jihad. Now, what is interesting is that there's a genuine jihad of Muslims in China. And do Muslims care? No, not at all. They don't care, right? But the moment something happens which is West related, then they're suddenly very interested. So Muslim children are taught to glorify jihadi conquests. They're taught to glorify the things that they did in the past, and they must despise all those who do not worship Allah. And we as Westerners, I count myself as half a Westerner, people are very naive about this. They fail to understand that people are literally taught to hate you. So now the progressive West demonizes European and Christian history, right? 20 years ago, Christopher Columbus was a hero. Now he's painted as a villain and people are pulling down his statues. Mehmet the Conqueror, who was a pedophile who loved little boys, right? His atrocities against Eastern Europe make the Islamic State appear tame, and he's praised in Turkey on the anniversary of the very savage sack of Constantinople. Now understand, let's just briefly speak about Vlad the Impaler, the man who became the prototype for Dracula, right? He was called the Impaler because he would take stakes, sharp stakes, bury them in the ground, and he would take these Muslim invaders and he would impale them on these stakes, and they would die a slow death as their weight pushed them onto these stakes, and these stakes would go through and kill them. The reason he did this was because he was enslaved, right? He was enslaved by Muslims. He escaped. His brother, I believe, was not so lucky. His brother was tortured or so on, right, and abused, as may
And
he
this
have
has
been.
been and this has been happening since the time of Muhammad. And I have shown there's a video
Yeah,
on my live stream, slavery in Islam, and you would say during the time of Muhammad as well, they used to kill runaway slaves. They used to kill runaway
right.
slave, and Muhammad was among them. And they said Muhammad did not see anything wrong about that. And
Disgusting.
secondly, you talked about homosexuality, and that is
Hmm.
why in the Turkey Museum, I have a book that I do not want to show right now, where
Yeah, I
in
know
the
which one.
Turkey Museum,
Disgusting.
yeah,
Disgusting.
they have the pictures, handmade pictures of homosexuality done by this religious people,
Right.
and that's how it is, man.
So Vlad the Impaler is viewed as a monster. He did this because he realized these people would not stop unless he faced them with equal intent, unless he was as intent or more intent than they were to defeat them, than they were to defeat him and his people. He needed, they were going to lose. So he was brutal towards them because he realized this would help them survive, would help their culture, their country, their civilization survive these Islamic invasions. And he massacred them for what they did to him, his family, and his people, right? And he was successful, right? And unfortunately, we don't realize we've raised very soft without real understanding of violence, and we don't understand what the reality of the world was then. Now, have a look. So you've got Western European nations are opening their doors to these Muslims, right? Germany and the United Kingdom, you're looking at crime and rape have soared in direct proportion to the number of Muslim refugees accepted. Let's look at Sweden. Rape has increased by 1,472% since they embraced Islamic multiculturalism, right? This is insanity why you would do this to your own people and then try to justify it. So the question is, what about the Crusades? And what about them? Right? The honest answer is, and what about them? They were good. They were necessary. Right? So violence committed in the name of other religions is logically unconnected to the question of whether Islam is violent. You can't say, well, Islam calls for violence. So by mentioning the Crusades, the hope of the Islamic and equally, you've got these Islamic apologists, right? And atheists for Islam, which is always very interesting. You get atheists for Islam. Very weird. Okay, they want to draw attention away from Islamic violence, and they want to paint religions in general as morally equivalent. And this is not true. Islam as a religion is responsible for more than half of all warfare that has a religious component. And I can go into detail on that. Shall I show the Encyclopedia of Warfare, Adam?
Sure, brother, whatever you feel comfortable with right now, because when it comes to Crusaders, how can Crusaders be, or Christian Crusaders, cross
Okay, give me a sec.
Crusaders? They say all of these words for them. How can they be the ones if they are defending their land, or if they are defending to take their land back, which was taken by them? You see, that's a big problem. And even at the time of Muhammad initiated 48 battles, out of which many of them were offensive in nature without any proper reasoning. No Muslim can give any reason for those, none
Right.
whatsoever. And there you
Right.
go, your next screen.
And his seerah glorifies his warfare. Now, guys, I want slight deviation, but very, very relevant. So, atheists, everyone always talks about Christianity as violent, and this is not true. They will say, "Oh, religion is violent," right? But they always have a special place for Islam and a horrible place for Christianity. This you'll find. This is an analysis of warfare, one done by the BBC called their War Audit, and as well an encyclopedia, 3-volume encyclopedia by 2 historians that discuss warfare. It is not every war ever fought, but they've made a very thorough collection of wars. And one of the components is that you can examine religious wars, or wars that have a religious component. And let's examine that and see. So these are the links here. Okay. Now, the Encyclopedia of Wars, the authors, Charles Phillips and Alan Axelrod, document the history of recorded warfare, right? And they have 1,763 wars, of which somewhere between 121 and 123 can be classified to involve a religious cause. So that's 120 wars, approximately, of 1,763 wars can be classified to have a religious cause or component, which accounts for less than 7% of all wars and less than 2% of all people killed in warfare, which is amazing because do you know that the Catholic Church invented the atom bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Adam?
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, Christians did that.
Wow.
Science didn't do that. Science is good. Scientists don't do things like that.
Not at all, brother. That's Christian. That's Christian. They were worshiping in front of the cross and they were bending their knees, and Jesus just gave them the atomic bomb.
The atomic bomb, yeah, no, because religions are violent and Christians are violent, and science is good, and science didn't make the bomb, and it wasn't science that built the plane that dropped the bomb, either.
No,
The
no, no.
Catholic
That
Church
was
did that.
no, brother. That was the aeroplane when the Pope was saying, "I need to go from this place to this place," and Jesus just gave him the aeroplane.
Yeah, no. So as you know, the atomic bomb was made by the Catholic Church, and yeah. So understand. So maybe you know what? If you look at it, pollution caused by science, the atom bomb created by science, right? Pollution in the ocean created by science. Maybe we need to ban science. Okay.
Man, you
So
sound like Muslim right now.
so so understand this
You
story has
already
no
accepted Islam, right?
well. So the story, the claim that religion is so violent is nonsense. It has no basis in fact and reality. So understand, it is estimated that between 1 million and 3 million people were killed in the Crusades. Now, don't forget, the Crusades happened over decades, right? And this was a lot of
And they
people.
were
Certainly.
happening because somebody was attacking them. Why don't you blame
Yeah.
that somebody who was attacking them?
Now, for instance, for the Crusades, now the Inquisition, and that's a separate story for another day, but the Inquisition, people love to say, look at the Spanish Inquisition. First of all, there was an Islamic Inquisition that people don't know about that killed tens of thousands of people, right? There were the apostasy wars and the Islamic Inquisition that no one talks about because I don't know, somehow Islam is innocent of all the violent murders it commits. But
No, brother,
the
the Hirbur Rida was done by Abu Bakr, and it was a peaceful Hirbur Rida. None of them were killed. They were peacefully taken without the sword, and they were not even killed. And they were peacefully asked, "Will you revert back to Islam?" And whoever said no, he wasn't killed. He was slaughtered because killing is bad.
correct, exactly. So now understand, when you look at the actual modern records of the Inquisition, now again, the Inquisition happened over 400 years. People say there are claims of up to 50 million people died in the Spanish Inquisition or whatever, in the Inquisition, right? Now the Inquisition happened, now there weren't even 50 million people in Europe, so they would have killed more than there were people in Europe if that were the case. The Inquisitions happened over 400 years, And according to the official records, now finally the Vatican opened up its records, and the Catholic Church provided the records, and historians have been digging through, and there's some new data that's come through, which is really interesting. It seems now the Catholic Church was trying to prevent these inquisitions. The Catholic Church actually was working very hard to stop them because the government was doing this. Okay, the Inquisition was a secular activity by the governments of the country. The Catholic Church was trying its best to make sure that to restrain the government and to try to constrain what they were doing and prevent any atrocities. So you're looking at now the figure for the Inquisition itself drops as low as, according to some figures, 752 people killed over 400 years. Now let's take the middle figure of about 2,000. Now the high number, I've put here the high number, 3,000. Okay, that's being generous. That's the high number. The typical number seems to be, people say there were about 2,000 people killed in the Inquisition. So in other words, if you divide 400 years by 2,000, I think you get about 6 or 8 people a year. So 8 people a year died in the Inquisition, and somehow the Inquisition was this mass slaughter, right? Someone work it out. It's like 5 people a year. Right? It was mass slaughter, apparently. So the Inquisition is a lie. It's a complete and utter lie how vicious this was. It was not, the whole story is a complete lie. Now, nearly 35 million soldiers and civilians died in just World War I in 4 years. Okay?
That was done. That was done by Christians, brother. Don't you know that?
You're right.
Nazi,
It was Catholic
yeah,
soldiers, right? Yeah,
yeah. They
you're
were
right.
wearing crosses on their chest, and they were going into the war, and they were trying to
Yep.
bring everyone to Christianity, brother.
So let's look at this chart, this bar chart here. Let's look at the number of deaths. You're looking at 35 million killed in just 4 years in the 20th century in World War I. The Inquisition doesn't even appear, and the Crusades is down here. Okay, the Crusades is down here. So understand, these secular wars have killed far more people in far less time, right? Through scientific killing, okay? Like the Catholic Church didn't invent the machine gun or mustard gas or bombs, okay? Now this is the Encyclopedia of Wars, okay? You can see the authors here, and it's 3 volumes. Now let's look at the claim again that religion causes war, which is a completely bogus claim. You've got 1,763 wars by cause from 8,000 BC to 2000 AD. So these guys took 10,000 years of war. Let's have a look. The dark purple or blue is Islamic wars, and then you have non-Islamic wars and secular wars. Let's look at the government wars. 93% of all wars is caused by governments. Okay? Now, if you look at the religious wars, or wars that can be said to have a religious component, more than half are Islam alone. And one second, Adam. The red portion here, which is non-Islamic warfare, right, which has a religious component, is all religions on earth combined. All religions combined. And the purple section here is Islam alone. Adam, up to you.
So basically, if you take Islam alone, there are so many wars that we have seen so far.
Right.
Most of them were because of their governments as well, because they wanted to expand their governments. Because as a Christian war, they were in defense, as we have seen already, that they were trying to get the land back from the Islamic jihadist. And by the way, according to the current Islamic narrative, any Islamic jihadi is not a Muslim. So IS, and all these were not Muslims.
Of course, he's a Muslim, because to be a Muslim, you need to believe in Allah, the last day, and Muhammad is the messenger, and say the Shahada, and you're a Muslim. No sin that a Muslim commits takes him out of the fold of Islam, unless he commits something that makes him an apostate, right? However, he can commit any sin, and no Muslim can call takfir on another Muslim. That is not permitted. So as long as this Muslim believes in Allah, believes in the last day, believes in Muhammad, he is a Muslim no matter what. So they can't say that's not a real Muslim. That is a real Muslim.
Man, you are taking all the chances for me to recite Shahada, brother. Dude, people were so happy in the early part of the stream that I was about to take Shahada. You just took it back.
Sorry, man. You could have been looking at a lot of naked slaves now if that were the case.
Oh, that would be yum yum.
Look, man. I don't know, man. It's just yeah, the religion of, I don't know. So just let me just continue. There are vast numbers of genocides, right? Those that are killed in ethnic cleanses, purges that are not connected to a declared war. So understand. Look at what happened in the Rwanda. That is not a war. That was a genocide. That's not a formal war. That is not a government war. That was a war between tribes. Millions died, right? At minimum, hundreds of thousands died. That is not included in this here. Understand? That was not a religious war between Catholics and Protestants, or the Catholic Church deciding to bomb Rwanda, right? So there are millions and millions and hundreds and thousands of events that are not even added into this database, right? Which have nothing to do with the Christian faith. And atheists, atheists will lie to you as much as any Muslim would. They will lie to you whole day, every day for free and try to sound smart while they're doing it. Okay? And they prey in your ignorance. So the USSR, it's estimated that 160 million civilians were killed in genocides in the 20th century alone, thanks to socialism, right? With 100 plus million killed by the communist states of the USSR and China. So now some do claim that communism is a state religion, and it very much is, okay? Because now in socialism or communism is the end state of socialism. So socialism is the process whereby you end up at communism where the state withers away, the government disappears, and people just live in harmony in the garden. Communism is the end state, the final goal, the dream of socialism. So you have an absolute dictator whose word is law and a holy book of unchallenged rules. Okay. Now, atheists will happily equate that the issue is that such a claim equates religion with the human desire for power. They conflate these things, right? So, unfortunately, there's a very big difference between this whole secular impulse and what a religion is. Okay. So now let's look at atheist leaders like Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, Lenin. They killed at least 110 million people, and that's according to the BBC War Audit. Look this up. And that's in the 20th century alone, which is more than all religious wars in the previous 1900 years combined. The 20th century, governments killed more people than all the religious wars in the previous nearly 2,000 years combined. Your thoughts, Adam?
So basically what you are saying is, let's just combine everything. Islam promotes jihad, and we have seen the first 1,000 years of Islam, they went out and started jihad and capturing cities and countries and areas. Christians kept thinking, can we even defend? And they actually had to come up taking the verses of the Bibles to come up with at least defensive war. And Crusaders
Yes.
came up. They were far too few. They were far too few and far too
Yeah.
less. And
To
then
let, yeah.
yet again, they were called the oppressors. And then the atheists, when they came in power, the secularism, when that came in power, we again have killing. So in reality, if we look at it, if you want peace in this world, you need Christ.
Yes, you do.
If you want peace in this
Yes, you
world, the
do. And
only
the fact that there
answer
is,
is that you
the
need
fact
Christ.
that there, I mean, the fact that we have the moral decline you see in America and Europe is because of the destruction of Christianity. And don't forget, all of these leaders were bent on the destruction of religion, and very much so on the destruction of Christianity. So, and look, people will lie, but the Bible condemns murder, condemns many forms of violence, right? And it does teach you to love your neighbor as yourself and to turn the other cheek and so on, laying down one's life for the others and so on. And this is sacrificial love, forgiveness, and so on. Christ's example is not one of warfare. Muhammad's one is of direct warfare. Okay. So let's briefly then the BBC War Audit, and I can finish off on the Crusades. You have atheistic totalitarian states like Stalin's Russia, Mao's China, have perpetrated more mass murder than any state dominated by a religious faith, with the exception of Islam, of course. But in this case, Islam killed everyone else around them, not necessarily, as many people inside their state. China, remember, Mao murdered at least 45 million people through starvation. Right? He starved these people to death. Stalin did the same. Stalin, I mean, under the Russians, they starved 12 million Ukrainians to death. Right? Hitler's
Just 12
Germany,
million?
of Ukrainians, just the Ukrainians.
Just, okay, fair
Yeah,
enough.
12 million, exactly. It's incredible. I
Wow.
mean, so understand, now you've got these genocides. Now, what's crazy is no one says real Nazism has never been tried, because everyone knows Nazism was tried. But you'll have atheists and other communists lying to you and saying real socialism is no, that was socialism. There's no doubt that was socialism. So understand, let's look at the estimated death tolls in what's called the 20th century hemoclism. A hemoclism is the string of interconnected barbarities that have made the 20th century so miserable for people. So the body count of the Big Five, the First and Second World Wars, the Russian Revolution, Communist China, and the Soviet Union account for about 75% of all deaths by atrocity in the 20th century. This is part of the BBC War Audit. Okay, looked it up, you can download it. So all faiths combined, minus Islam, have caused less than 4% of all of humanity's wars and violent conflicts. What we can learn from this is that religions like Christianity prevent violence. They minimize violence. They don't eliminate it, right? But they minimize it. Further, they played no motivating role in the major wars that have resulted in the most loss of life. So when some smug atheist tells you, but look at the Catholic Church, look at the wars, and look at Christian wars, showing the facts, and you'll realize this man has no respect for facts either. He's about as religiously bigoted as any typical Islamic Dawah specialist.
So basically, what you're saying is that secularism makes Islam look so good.
Sadly, it does.
Wow, so secularism makes Islam looks so nice and good and awesome, man.
Yeah.
Because like,
so don't you? Yeah.
It's crazy. Like if you look at it from this perspective, Islam didn't kill many. they didn't do much, but yet
No,
at that
look,
time,
the thing is, look, these guys didn't look at Islam correctly. Because look, Joseph Stalin, we know the number is closer to 65,000 or 60. I mean, it's closer to 50,000, right? Mao Zedong, 37 million. It says here. We know that this number is close to 65 million, right? This number, we know that the real figure is almost double. This one, nearly double. Okay, Hitler killed 20 million, right? Chiang Kai-shek, Vladimir Lenin. Okay, these are crazy numbers, but the largest genocide in the world that is unacknowledged is the Islamic invasion of India. They killed something like over several hundred years. They killed about 80 million Hindus. 80 million. The big time killer here is Islam.
oh yes, they did that. But we need to understand some facts as well. Secularism started in the 18th century and 19th century. 19th century to be precise, where the world population was pretty huge. If we actually make the graph as a weighted average of the population of that world versus the population of this world, and then make a weighted average graph, I think Islam will come pretty close when it comes to percentages.
Yeah, I'm trying to get this. It's the best I can.
Yeah,
Yep.
next
So
we
look,
have to show a weighted average graph with the current population, and you'll see Islam will come pretty close
yeah.
with the secularism.
So understand, you're looking at. So I'll pause here. I'll jump back to the. Oops. I'll jump back to my original presentation. Just go back
Jordan,
to
the
the.
link is posted in the pin, so the pin comment has the link, brother, sister.
Yeah. So I'll basically end off here. Okay, and we'll get close to ending here. So now, understand, warfare is brutal. The Crusaders had to fight a brutal enemy, and I can tell you because I've had training. I've had to deal with situations, right? I've had to look people in the eye as part of my job and ask myself the question: is this person going to make it through the day? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't face your enemies with the same or greater intent, they will overwhelm you emotionally. You need to be more intent on going home that night than they are in preventing you from doing so, right? And unfortunately, warfare is not clean. People don't do necessarily the good things, okay? But you're dealing with an enemy that is incredibly vicious, and you're fighting to save your civilization because they will wipe you out and they will rape your mother, your daughter, your sister, your cousin,
And your wife.
and your wife in front of you. Understand? So these people were fighting a war against an enemy because once Islam flowers in full without opposition, you're going to see ISIS every day, everywhere. ISIS is the true face of Islam.
Like
Okay?
Khalid bin Nawaira when he captured, he killed the husband, and on he beheaded the husband, put the head in a boiling water, and on the same sand wetted with the blood of her husband, he raped her and then ate the head
Oh,
in front of her.
disgusting.
In front of her. This
So yeah,
is Khalid bin Nawaira, the
you
Tabi'in,
know,
Taba Tabi'in of Muhammad.
disgusting, disgusting. It's just Islam's inversion of everything that is moral and holy. So I'll end off with the Hidayah. We're just going to briefly discuss some of the jihad rulings in Hidayah just to give you some context. Okay. So the sacred injunction concerning war is sufficiently observed when it is carried on by any party of Muslims. It is then no longer of any force with respect to the rest. As long as some Muslims, that small minority, as long as they are making violent jihad, the sin, the crime of non-performance is lifted from the rest, because the sin of not obeying Allah will fall upon all the Muslims, and they are potentially going to hell if some Muslims are not committing violent jihad. Slay the infidels. This is a Sharia. This is the biggest Sharia manual, single Sharia manual in the world, right? This is the Hanafi Hidayah. So slay the infidels. War is permanently established until the day of judgment, and war is commanded for the purpose of advancing the faith. Okay, and it says here very clearly, the destruction of the sword is incurred by infidels, although they be not the first aggressors, as appears from various passages in the sacred writings which are received to that effect. And it says here, infidels may be attacked without provocation, right? And it says here, if no Muslims were to make war, the whole of the Muslims, the entire Ummah, would incur the criminality of neglecting it. It is criminal in Islam to not make war on the kafir. You are the kafir, right?
And
So
you are the
understand.
Kafir.
Sorry, what?
And so are you the Kafir. And so am I
So
the
am I.
Kafir. And we are
Yeah.
all najis according to Islam, Quran chapter number 9, verse number 28. All the mushrikeen and whoever does not believe in Allah and Muhammad are najis. Najis comes out as filth that you can't even touch. That's what we are according to Islam.
So understand, religious violence, it goes against the fundamental doctrine of Christianity. Christ has no example of violence. Muhammad's example is of extensive violence in his seerah. The seerah comes from the siyar, which means the war, okay, the battles of the Prophet. You can even find a seerah collection called the Battles of the Prophet. Now, this goes against Christ's example, Christ's teaching, and it goes against Christian doctrine, right? Whereas it is perfectly in line with Islamic doctrine. So now, for over 1,000 years, okay, we have been hearing this Crusader story, right? And the modern West is obsessed in declaring itself guilty of being evil and thinking that these other cultures will then forgive them and then also be nice if we're nice. No, they will look at you as weak and stupid because they are proud of their warrior history. They are proud of their accomplishments, right? They don't see it as a problem. So understand, Islam's doctrine has not changed. Only their methods have changed. The ulama, the leaders of Islam, are very, very patient and they're waiting. And of course, in Islam, there is a saying, they say that while we have the watches, they have the time. So I'll end off here.
Yeah, while and that's the teaching of Muhammad as well. If you look at the Quran from the Makki surah to Madani surah, you will see a gradual fighting coming up from no defense, just be nice, to defend, to go and fight and subdue. This is,
Mhm.
I have done many on that. But while you end, are you done with the presentation, brother?
Yeah, we can finish here. I mean, just, yeah, should be fine.
So I'm going to show you another video that is also in my channel. Very few views. I don't know why it has very few views. It has only 726 views, and I'm amazed because this guy exposes what we are saying. Because when we say something, we are Islamophobes. when a Muslim says something, he is not Islamophobe. But now this guy is also called Islamophobe,
Is this guy a
stupidity.
real Muslim?
He is a real Muslim, but he has influence of the West, so he tried to say less of the lies and more of the truths. So I don't know whether I shared it with the audio or not. Hold on, let me share it with the audio. Listen from the guy who has a PhD degree in Islam, not a baby. And what is he saying? And I have shown these evidences from everywhere. Let's just watch.
There's a huge controversy amongst modern Muslims about the expansion of the Khilafah. And a lot of times, what we have been taught or have heard people say is that these expansions were defensive in nature, that the Sharia does not allow an offensive war. This is the claim that is given. And this is a claim that is simply false and incorrect.
So this is false and incorrect. Thank you. At least he's telling the truth. Look what he says further.
The claim that there's no such thing as offensive jihad and that the Muslims of early Islam never engaged in conquests is a claim that is simply not backed up by any shred of evidence. In fact, the opposite is true.
So any Muslim who would say that Islam do only of defensive jihad is, it doesn't have, come on, why am I saying that? Please watch it again what he says. Watch again. Listen.
The claim that there's no such thing as offensive jihad and that the Muslims of early Islam never engaged in conquests is a claim that is simply not backed up by any shred of evidence. In fact, the opposite is true. And that is an undeniable fact, which is why nobody pre-modernity ever said this.
See, you have to understand that. Look, what kind of wars and how many? He's going to explain that now.
In the seerah of the Prophet, we can say that very clearly most of the battles were necessary and were defensive to gain the rights of the Muslims
Now imagine when he said most, let's look what he says in most.
back. However, it is also true to say that not all such battles can easily be put into this category. Some battles, especially some saraya, remember saraya was the expeditions the Prophet did not participate in. He sent others out. Many of the saraya, especially in 9th and 10th Islam, there was no dire need. There's no threat at all. Going to the fringes of Oman, for example, right? Going to the other side of Bahrain, for example, it's not as if there was an immediate threat in some of those saraya. And especially we talked about the Battle of Tabuk. The Battle of Tabuk remains a big question mark amongst seerah specialists. Why? Why was one of the largest armies ever sent up north? For what? And in reality, it seems one of the strongest reasons is to show the powers up north that Muslims meant business and that they are going to attack, which is why Abu Bakr as-Siddiq took the initiative to attack. Followed the same route when he went to attack Sham. Same route of Tabuk. And he went from Tabuk onwards. So the process was basically setting the precedent for them. Now,
so Prophet actually set the precedence to these caliphs
Offensive acts.
to come later and do these offensive jihads. So when these Muslimin come up and they say jihad is defensive in nature only, if you read anybody, you can just anybody can read about these. If anybody just read, they will know that it was not defensive. Even the Ghazwa Badr, the first battle Badr, you know, there were 4 attacks by the Muslimin, 4 attacks by the Muslimin, and Badr was a retaliation on those 4 attacks, that the people from the Kaaba came out in retaliation. In retaliation. So then Muslims are saying Badr was defensive. No, Badr was not defensive. It was offensive because you made 4 attacks, and because you are making 4 attacks, you were and the last attack was you took their men and women capture of war. Then they came to take their people back. Then they came. The Badr, the first battle, even the first battle that you say it's defensive, it was not defensive. It was because of you. Same like when you say Crusaders were attacking. So you need to understand Crusaders are in retaliation of what you are doing to their land, their women, their children, their men. They were in retaliation far too late.
Yeah.
Same. Badr was far too late. When Muhammad migrated to Medina, they should have done the first attack and killed him and finished him right there and then. But they did not. They were peaceful people. Muhammad and his followers made 4 attacks on different caravans. And then finally, on the fourth one, they took captures of male and female and kids and killed some in there.
So
Then
you're saying
Badr
he was
happened.
a caravan robber?
No, he was not, brother. He was not caravan robber. Not at all. Not at all.
Just wanted to check.
No. He did not go and did the caravan attack before Badr. He sent his people to do the caravan robbing. He did not do it personally.
Ah, he was a planner of caravan robbing, like a mafia boss,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
like a
That
crime
is why
lord.
So, that is why before Muhammad was a Muslim, you would see him working as a shepherd, and then you will see him working as a tijara, the person who does business, tijarat, from take things from one place
Shepherd.
to another. These were the two narratives that you will see, that for Khatija he was doing the tijara, means he was taking his material from one place to another to sell. But when Muhammad became a Muslim, a prophet of Islam, he went to Medina. Can any source tell me what was his source of income? You will not find any of source of income for him at that time. So what was he doing? Because Quran says that the 20% of the loot is for the prophet and his Allah. So he would send
How much cash does
expeditions.
Allah need then exactly?
A lot, brother, because Allah and Jesus, Jesus of Islam, the Isa of Islam, he is with Allah. And this is something that you need to comprehend. Isa of Islam, Allah took him to himself, right, brother? He did not die, nor did they crucify him, but Allah
Right.
raised him to himself. So, but but Quran says that Isa of Islam is has to pray and give zakat for as long as he is alive. This is also Quran. Now, when Isa is with Allah, Isa has to earn money to give zakat, because he has to give zakat, the charity, for as long as he is alive. And zakat is a compulsory charity that he has to give. So
Wow.
Isa and Allah are actually playing poker, and Allah is losing big time. So Allah
That's why he
needs
needs the
money.
cash.
Yeah, that is why he made Muhammad to do this, so that 20% of the money will come to Muhammad and his Allah, so that the money which Allah is losing from Isa, because they are playing poker and he's losing with Isa, he could give it to Isa so that Isa could pay the zakat. Come on, man. This is simple logic.
Yeah.
See, simple logic. Even though logic, you cannot use logic with Allah, but that's simple logic, brother.
Wow. Yeah, I know. So yeah, I mean, Muhammad was just a caravan robber. He was a thief. He was a warlord. He was a crime boss. So
Uh, he was not robbing it himself.
yeah, yeah. Okay,
Eh,
so that's why he's innocent. Yeah, that's why he was innocent. And
Yeah,
these
but by
people
the
were
way,
just following orders. Yeah.
at the time of Khaybar, you do realize that he actually deceived the people by allowing his people to wear the robes of ihram, so that the caravans and people would think that they are not attacking them, and he actually went from the behind and gave them the idea that they are in ihram, so they are not carrying any weapons, and then they attacked the caravan and they looted everything. uh, but like nobody is going to mention that, because Muhammad was in there in that one. So do not mention that Muhammad was not a caravan robber.
You know, if you read some of the older of the Qurans, right? like they'll say war is deceit, but if you read the oldest English translation of the Quran that exists, which is like 1600s or something, the sentence there actually goes that it says that war is a game of deceit.
Interesting. I'll have to search these verses and see in Arabic what it says.
Yeah, if you go to the very early Quran, there are no verses, there are no verse numbers.
Hmm.
It's very interesting. There are no verse numbers, and also if you read through the text to when you read through scholarly works on the Quran from like 100 or 120 or 130 years ago, you actually have a different Quran than you have today, because they'll mention a verse that says this. You'll go to the modern Quran and it'll say something completely different, and the other verse will be a few verses before or a few verses after. So obviously the Quran, as we know, was changed in in the early 20th century. But so the Quran was a very different thing, and it's crazy when you read some of the earlier scholarly works in the Quran. It's a very different book.
Man,
Clearly it wasn't the same.
that's the reality of the situation, man. When it comes to Islam, you cannot say a thing, you cannot work on anything. And yes, war is deceit. Somebody is saying is war deceit. Yes, war is
Yeah.
deceit. You have in Sahih al-Bukhari, and Sahih
And
al-Bukhari
I
is
had a point
referring
in that. When I was
fifth.
doing discussions about Islamic warfare, people would always say, "Oh, but the Mossad, the Jews, the Jews." Mossad says that that war is deception. By way of deception, we will make war. Everyone always so happily says Mossad says, by way of deception. They're so deceitful. Muhammad was saying that stuff 1400 years ago, but that's okay because it's Islam, right? It's okay when they do it. Just hypocrites.
But okay, yeah, no. I have to revert back. So I have to revert back, and I would say, no, brother, that's not how it is. You need to understand this. So it's not how it is. The narrative is different. You are just an Islamophobe. So you should know that.
Yeah. Yeah. I shouldn't go on too long. I have a busy day tomorrow, so
Oh
so
yes. So thank you so very much for being here, Fatima. If you are here still, and you are not just somebody who would just send a message and then run away and then send the message again, now is the time to come up and have a talk. There is a question here. Were the caravan riders commanded by Allah? Where is the verse? Momo raided 6 caravans and failed every time. He succeeded the 7th time, and this is Nikala raid. Did Allah failed Momo 6 times? Brother, when I talk about the first 4, these are before Badr. The fourth one was actually successful. The first 3 weren't. And so Allah is failing so many times, but Allah did give him the victory in Badr. And in Uhud, Muhammad's 2 of his teeth were damaged and broken. And so there are so many things on that. Like, I don't know. Uh, I think you need to come up with a different verdict on that. That's not a discussion point, anyways. And yes, Allah is Satan. Uh, that's the reality, and I have covered that part as well. Um, uh, Paul, uh, I don't believe Muhammad existed myself. Makkah was just a hamlet in the. But let me just tell you something. If Muhammad's existence was not in question, let me just say something. If Muhammad's existence was not in question, why would Islamic scholars put it into their books that if anybody says that Muhammad did not existed, he should be put to death? Like, that's a very quick question. Let me show you. What do you think, Lloyd?
that's a really difficult one. I've listened to both sides of the argument. I would say, from my perspective, as what I know right now, I would say there was a character, and I would say that it's very probable that a later character became Muhammad,
Hmm.
but it was based on a real. I believe there was an original character that was kind of taken as the prototype, and he did certain things, and they utilized this man, and then they altered him. And remember, the Umayyads made changes to the Quran and to Islamic doctrine, and the Abbasids made changes. So over time, this changed, and eventually, he became a political something they could modify according to their political needs. So this is my view right now. I think there was someone, but not necessarily Muhammad as we know him.
So everything that you are saying is approved by these books. So let's check this out. So if a Muslim says that Muhammad is not a prophet or was not sent to that, his Quran was not revealed to him, he is to be killed. Any Muslim who disbelieves in the messenger of Allah, the state of an apostate. It is the same with somebody who openly declares that he denies the prophet, that there is no prophet, or he denies his prophethood. He is like an apostate, is called upon repent. So who declares he denies the prophet. So by this sentence, I would say that he's denying that there is a prophet. Ibn Qasim said something similar about anyone who calls himself a prophet and say that he received revelation. Now this is the prophet after Muhammad. Then it says that in the same way, whether he makes the claim secretly or openly, he should be ding donged. And then it says Jew who calls himself a prophet claims that he has been to people or says that there is a prophet after our prophet is asked to repent. If he openly declares, if he repents, he is left. If he is not, he killed. This is because he rejects prophet who said there is no prophet after me. Therefore, he forges lies against Allah and his messengership. Then anyone who doubts a single letter which Muhammad, may Allah be blessed and peace, brought is denying unbeliever. His judgment against anyone who rejects prophet is he killed. Who rejects prophet is to be killed. Then he said, whoever said prophet is black is to be killed because the prophet was not black. Then anybody who says that prophet died before his beard began to grow means the prophet of Islam was not the one that you actually claim, but rather he died in a very young age. You guys are giving us some falsified information about the same guy who actually died in his young age. He is to be killed. That he was in Tohrat, or he was not in Makkah but in Tohrat, Morocco, and not in Tehma. He is to be killed because he constitute denies. So now, brother, why would early people would claim these things that it has to be put in their books? Question number one, that this claim that Muhammad was at his young age and he died, he never received prophethood. Point number two, he was not in Makkah but in Morocco. He was not in Makkah but in Morocco. He should be killed. These two references proclaims outshout that there was a made up story, and maybe he was actually not in Makkah but in Morocco or somewhere wherever. But
Right.
so they have to suppress that, and they would kill anybody who would proclaim something like this. So if some anchor says that he never existed, okay, you should be killed. And you say
Right.
there was a prophet but he was not in Makkah, you should be killed as well.
Yeah. I want to share something as well, if I may, for a minute.
Yes, brother.
That'd be okay.
By the way, just to show everyone, this is not a Christian book. This is a book of Muhammad, Messenger of
Shifa.
Allah, a Shifa of Qadi Aliyad, and it is translated by Aisha Beverly. So
She's
this
a
is,
Sufi. She is a very highly trained scholar.
yes, and she's a Muslim scholar, very highly trained Muslim scholar, and this book is Messenger of Allah. It's an Islamic book. So whoever says Muhammad never existed
This
or
is the
he
most
did not exist in
well-known.
Makkah.
This is the most well-known of the Sirah, the biographies or the Gospels of Muhammad. So what I have here is 100 great books of Islamic civilization. I'm going to zoom in as much as I can. So there are different governments in the Islamic world. One of them is the Pakistani government. I don't know if the Pakistani government funded the translation of this one, but the Pakistani government does have a project, and so do the Qataris and so do the Saudis, where they are translating books that they believe are the most important ones in Islamic history. And this is from the project, the 100 Great Books of Islamic Civilization. So this one is Muslim International Law, the Kitab al-Siyar al-Sagir. Siyar, now you just saw a Siyar, Okay, that was the Sirah, the what are today called the biographies of the Prophet. So that was probably, very probably, the most famous of the biographies of Muhammad, the Ash Shifa. Right, there's a few that are very well known. There's also the Sealed Nectar, which is another very popular one. Okay,
Hmm.
by Sheikh Mubarakpuri, which is another very popular siyar. Now, the siyar is now known as biographies, but really the Gospels of Muhammad. But they really, originally, the word siyar meant the wars. It's the wars of the Prophet. The example of Muhammad is the wars. And this one is the Kitab al-Siyar al-Sagir, right? Siyar from war. And it's by Muhammad. This is a Jewish name, as you can see, Muhammad ibn al-Hassan al-Shaybani. Is this a Jewish or Christian name? I can't tell. Can you help me out, Adam?
What's the name? Kitabu Saghir? Go down.
Muhammad ibn al-Hassan al-Shaybani. Is this Jewish or Christian? I can't tell.
Apparently, it cannot be neither, basically.
Okay, so it's probably a Muslim guy. Okay, so
Probably.
on that, so on that score, this is known as the shorter book on Muslim international law. Okay, so this is the textbook on Islamic foreign policy, because remember, the nation of Islam is a real nation. Before you are an American, before you're a Brit, before you're a Pakistani, you're part of the Ummah, the nation of Islam, right? So you belong to the Muslim nation first, and you are a Brit or a Pakistani second and third. So this is Islamic international law. And let's just have a brief look at this thing. You need to understand the fundamentals of Islamic international law. So Islamic foreign policy, let's look at chapter 1. Instructions of the Holy Prophet about the conduct of war. So the very first chapter on Islamic international relations says how we make war. Not how we make
Oh,
friends, how we do trade, how we go and shoot people in the face. This is chapter 1 of Islamic international and foreign policy. Section: the prohibition of warlike operations during the sacred months has been abrogated.
oh, so you
And
can
point
actually
number,
make a war in the prohibited months as well?
oh, doesn't it say so in 929?
Ah,
Right? And the army's treatment of the disbelievers. Oh my golly. So the first three things they speak about in Islamic foreign policy is attack attack them whenever you like, and how do you deal with prisoners of war? And
uh,
the acquisition of Muslim property earlier taken away by non-Muslims, even if they owned it first. It's a joke. You're going to read this, but this is very interesting. So I just thought I would share that with you. But this is Islamic foreign policy. It's warfare.
it's awesome, and it shows how peaceful Islam is, brother. Islam is peace. You need to understand that. Islam is peace.
It is peace. Yep. Yeah. So I just wanted to share that.
So just let you guys know, I have shown this before as well. This is Brother Lloyd's channel. I am sharing the link in the chat as well. Subscribe to Brother Lloyd. I don't know why he has so few subscribers. This needs to go into thousands. He has such great information, guy, person of knowledge. I don't know why he has an elephant there, but maybe because he
I
is
took
an
that
elephant.
photo on Safari once
Yeah,
in
so
Africa.
this is Brother Lloyd's channel, and you guys should subscribe. Just like any Muslim who would come up and say something in his channel, and maybe he has 10 videos, and you will see his subscriber will be like 10,000 or 8,000 or 12,000. But when it comes to people who are giving you the truth with references, and those channels won't even have any references, they'll be just start saying something about Islam. How good is Islam? They won't even show you any references. They and yet they have like thousands of subscribers. And when we talk about the Christians who are showing you the reality, the truth with historical evidences, with the evidences from the Sunnah, from Hadith, from Quran, from the Sharia, from the fiqh, like I don't know why they are not getting the attention of our brothers and sisters. So please subscribe to his channel. I'm sharing his channel again.
Thank you.
Elephant is Lloyd's best friend. Maybe once he was an elephant, now he just changed into human. If he accepts the secular belief of evolution of human beings, but that's a separate thing. Um, but you don't believe that, right?
No, I'm not that kind of African. No, no, no. That was a photo I took on. Oh gosh, that was a photo I took on safari.
Okay, so you went to safari, and I'm glad that you are back. Otherwise, elephant can actually kill as well. You know that. So, guys, thank
Ah,
you so much. So, thank you so very much for watching. I hope you guys had fun as well as you guys had information. Information with fun is good. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you guys have questions, I'm gonna get Lloyd next week again. Um, Keep your questions with you. Watch it again. If you still have questions, next week we are gonna come back again. Throw your questions to Brother Lloyd. If you want us to have a just a Q&A session and no information other than what your questions are, we can also do that. Let me know in the comments of this video, and every one of you should go and subscribe to Brother Lloyd's channel, guys. He has knowledge like you would hardly get anywhere else. So God bless you all. Have a blessed day, evening or night, wherever you are. Brother Lloyd, your last words, brother.
no, thank you guys. Please use this information, um, especially when people. That little bit I opened up with about the basic timeline of the Crusades. When people tell you, what about the Crusades? Show them that. Just show them that. I have shut people up by just showing them that and saying, now, this is why we needed the Crusades. Like, to tell me more. Because people don't know. They just throw these arguments out to shut you up. And when some fool tells you that oh, religions are violent or Christianity is violent, show them the facts. That little piece I showed you about. I will put that in. I'll make sure that it's linked so that you can use that. The link to my database is available. Show them that information and then tell them maybe we need to ban science, because these atheists always talk about science. Say maybe we need to ban science. Science is responsible for pollution. Science is responsible for planes that drop bombs. Science is responsible for making bullets. Science is responsible for the atomic bomb. So maybe we need to push back against them and against their lies with facts. So please use the information, share it, and don't let people try to bully you. Don't let people try to humiliate you. Humiliate them instead. Let them shut up for once.
Amen. Amen. Uh, Guys, have fun. God bless you all. And what do I say in the end? Yeshua
Akbar
Akbarul
Azim.
Azim. Amen. Take care,
Sweet.
guys.